Hey everyone, we're just going to wait a couple minutes to let everyone join the webinar before we begin. As you're entering, we do have the chat up. We'll have that up throughout the webinar that you can give any questions and we'll do our best to answer them in the chat. We'll also have a Q&A at the end that hopefully we can get to. Yeah, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat as you join, that would be great. We can have some conversations. We'll give it about like 15 more seconds and then we can begin. All right, people are rolling in right now. So why don't it's 2:02 Eastern Standard Time. So why don't we begin? So welcome to Generative AI, the new school supply, presented by COSN's EdTech Innovation Committee. We have a number of guest speakers today in the next hour who will share their thoughts on AI and education. Some of our topics include what should you do first in your districts, AI and plagiarism, AI tools for fun and productivity, and assessments in the age of generative AI. So for the sake of time, each guest speaker will introduce themselves before they're part of the presentation. But as a special feature today, Laura Geringer will do our graphic facilitation. For those of you who aren't familiar with graphic facilitation, is she'll take notes of what everyone is speaking about today, and she will draw the notes graphically. And it's if you haven't seen it before, it is pretty neat. So at the end, we may have a time for a short Q&A. But like I said before, if you have any questions, you can wait to the end and put your question in the chat. So with that, let me begin. So teacher and administrator workshops. So if you haven't had them, you should definitely make time to have them soon. I think I saw a survey where almost 90% of teachers haven't had any professional development on generative AI. But first, my name is Doug Kuchar. I'm the Director of Technology for South Windsor Public Schools in South Windsor, Connecticut. And we held some teacher and administrative workshops last year and some in the summer. And I'd like to share some thoughts, and maybe you're thinking, or you might have had some in your district, or you may be thinking of having some. But I'll just go over some topics that really stood out during these meetings. The first is the thoughts and assumptions of AI. So really, we reviewed what generative AI is. I think as technology leaders, we've been really thinking about what AI is for years, and then generative AI. But we have to really understand that a lot of people, it's not even on their radar, even though we hear it on the news a lot. So we really need a baseline, and that's what we did as a group. And basically, we talked about how it enhances personalization, and really, in those meetings, I had people use generative AI just to get, because a lot of them haven't even logged into an AI program, and just to see what it's like. So that's the first thing to do, I think, is to really get in there, talk about what it is, and use it. And then from that, after we've used it for a little bit, you talk about academic integrity in the age of AI, and really what class expectations now are. And what I've really learned, I think the slide went around. What I've really, where are they back here? Got it. So the class expectations, what I really learned in the couple months that really generative AI has been around is that it is a learning process for all of us. And so this isn't any hard and fast rules on AI. It's really just a discussion. So we discussed it with administrators, we discussed it with a group of our teachers, and really we're kind of just, we're planning for it, but we're not setting any hard and fast rules as yet. Also, we talked about new skills and adapting old skills, questioning strategies, new media literacy skills, what facts are, and also best practices. What are prompts? So as English teachers for years have been talking about, well, prompts for prompt or essays, but I really never thought about what a prompt is until really generative AI has come around. So really, what is a prompt and what are good prompts for generative AI solutions? We have ChatGPT is out there, Google's Bard is out there, and really, just in the few months that I've been using it, it's really crafting those prompts and having a conversation with the generative AI to really get what you kind of want as an output. And we also talked about fact checking generative AI products, because generative AI is only good at the data that it is trained on, and that data could be false, or it could come up with some false assumptions. Remember, generative AI is a prediction machine, so it's predicting to see what kind of word comes next. And sometimes its reasoning does not come out as well as it should. So really with teachers, talking about fact checking and how we're going to talk with our students. And then we talked about what's next. We talked about professional learning, when to do it. I know we don't really have a lot of professional learning opportunities like full day. In general, in Connecticut, we have about 2 days of all day PD, and then we will have some during the week, but it's not full days. So these are things that we talked about. How can we incorporate in our own courses and in our classes? And we also talked about about personal learning communities. Many of you have personal learning communities out there, and how the group of teachers in their subject area, they're the experts. And so they really have to grapple with AI in good ways and in ways that could be concerning. But the best way to do it, I think, is at the grassroots level and in discussions, and then also talking with the students as well, because we're all in this, we're all in the boat together. So with that, I'm going to stop my part of the presentation and hand it over to the next.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dave Jarbo. I'm the Director for Instructional Technologies and STEAM and CTE in the Harrison School District in Colorado Springs. I'm also the co-chair for the Education Innovation Committee with COSIN and serve on our local state chapter as well. So we know that AI is trending in education, and we're really excited about what our committee is doing, and hopefully maybe some guidance that we can provide you. You know, in education, I've been in education 30 plus years, and, you know, I kind of use the analogy of a tsunami, and this is our next tsunami that's going to come. The tide is pulling out, and we know something's going to happen. So we need to prepare as that giant wave's going to splash over us in a lot of ways that we can't control. So I was on the coast of San Diego, near San Diego at San Clemente Beach, and there were these tsunami warning signs. And one of the things that said is seek higher ground. So we're hoping that we can provide that higher ground for you with this committee as we provide information, not just today in this webinar, but ongoing through our website and the blog posts that we'll be sharing in the next months to come. I'm really excited about this venture, and I was in a recent webinar for the state of Colorado. There were, I think, over 180 people on board, which tells you for a webinar at the state level that this is definitely something that people are interested in. And we were fortunate to have Christian Pinedo from AI EDU share some information with us. So I thought it'd be great to bring him on board with us this afternoon. He has kind of He'll tell you more about his organization, but he kind of has a wider perspective than we do, sometimes just working in a district. So Christian, welcome, and I want to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Dave. And yeah, you're like, I'll start with an intro. So my name is Christian Pinedo. I work at AIED, which is a nonprofit that works specifically in the AI space. And we've been at this for about 4 years. And you can imagine the difference between talking to school districts a year ago versus talking to school districts today. I think a year ago is very much so trying to tell school districts like this is going to change education. These technologies are advancing really rapidly, and you're going to see it affect your classrooms really soon. And a lot of school districts are like, okay, yeah, I'll think about it in like a year or two. And then come November with things like ChatGPT and other generative AI tools. Now it's kind of the opposite, where school districts are like, oh, wow, this is hitting a lot quicker than we expected it to. And so now the work that we do is really across the country, working with school districts, working with ESAs, working with nonprofit organizations and tech companies to help build AI literacy across the country. My background personally is in education. Like I taught high school chemistry for 7 years. Absolutely hated high school teaching chemistry, but found like a really big passion in building out CTE programs. So thinking about how do we best prepare students for the workforce, especially students where college might not be their ideal track. And it was in that work where I realized that AI was changing the workforce already. And I didn't think it would be very long until AI would change education. And so made a bit of a career shift, went to go work at the Stanford Institute for Human-Centered AI, where I focus solely on responsible use of AI in education settings and mitigating things like bias and safe use and data safety and all of that for minors. So I want to kind of give like a very brief but broad sweep of what I think is happening right now and what I think like school systems are grappling with. The chart that's on the screen right now is a chart that at the bottom of the screen might be difficult to read. There's several standardized tests that we use across this country. So it might be AP tests like AP History, AP Math, and the the LSAT. And then in blue is basically how GPT 3.5, which is a version that was released in November, would score on all of these standardized tests. And then in green is how GPT-4, which is the updated version, would score on these tests. And you can see there's been an improvement in how GPT-4 would test on all these standardized tests. But another kind of scarier thing that educators are kind of opening their eyes to is if this technology is able to score within the 80th percentile of all human students on standardized tests, what does that mean for how we as a school system measure intelligence from our students? And it's really kind of opening our eyes to what kind of shifts in educational practices and skills development do we need to make in education. And then this chart is from the World Economic Forum just this past year, and it's just a prediction of between this year and 2027 what they predict the 10 fastest growing jobs might be and the 10 fastest declining jobs might be. And you'll notice that the fastest growing jobs are very, very, very tied to AI technologies, whether it's rooted in data or information analytics or AI metrics. Like a lot of this technology is unlocking a whole different field of careers. And my takeaway here is we need to start preparing students for skills that'll most benefit them in the careers that might be emerging in the next couple of years. I think it's kind of scary to me talking to a ninth grader and thinking that ninth grader has potential to enter the workforce in 4 or 5 years. I have no idea what that workforce is going to look like. This technology is changing so quickly. And so rather than trying to be extremely prescriptive and saying this is the job that you should be looking at, I want to think about what kinds of skills should I be equipping this freshman in high school with that I think would benefit them most in those kinds of careers. And then I wanted to share a little bit of what I think. I mentioned that we work across the country with a whole bunch of school districts and a whole bunch of organizations. And I wanted to share a few of the learnings that I've taken from working with a lot of these different organizations. One is that this is changing so quickly, and I think it's no secret that education as a system does not move very quickly. So it's trying to find ways to be a little bit more nimble with things that we can do. One of those is establishing communities of practice or informal learning opportunities for teachers, give teachers tools to meet and discuss and share ideas and talk. And then from those communities of practice, you can build nimble teams that would then help your district form guidelines, right? Like 6 months ago, school districts were grappling with, do I ban ChatGPT or do I not ban ChatGPT? I think in the last few months, schools have come to the realization that it's pretty much impossible to completely block these technologies, especially as we see the emergence of things like large language models being built into in Google Docs, being built into search engines like Microsoft's Bing. It's really difficult to block those kinds of things. So rather, you need to start to put out some frameworks or guidelines around the safe use of these technologies. And it's very difficult to do that because the technology is changing very quickly. And so putting together pretty nimble teams in order to help establish a couple of those guidelines is what like a very good starting point that districts can do next week. Another thing that I think was hit in by the last speaker was just quickly educating teachers. My number one tip for everyone is just give your teachers some time and space to play with this tool. Give them some autonomy and give them the knowledge to learn and develop best practices themselves, because I think they are the subject matter experts in terms of working with students. And so give your teachers a safe but responsible way to use this technology, play with the technology, and figure out where its limits are themselves. And then finally is just more thinking of school districts as organizations, right? Learning how districts can take advantage of the tools. How can my HR team use AI in order to make them more productive? How can my IT teams use this technology to make them make their jobs a lot easier? Thinking about it as a productivity tool is also just what every company in the country is thinking about. And I think school districts should think about it as well. And then my closing challenge, I suppose, is it's a very difficult tension to address AI and provide safe guidelines for its use without being too prescriptive. And because the challenge is that the technology is changing very quickly, you don't want to put guidelines forth that will be outdated in 6 months. And so it's a very difficult tension that school districts are kind of grappling with right now is how can you make sure that your work is going to be effective, but also evergreen and lasting through the changes that the technology is kind of going through. And then I'm going to turn it back to David to kind of give us some closing, like larger thoughts about the hierarchy of needs for schools.
Thanks, Christian. I really appreciate your perspective and that the guidance that you're hearing from across the entire country. I love this graphic. It's by Eric Nantrup from edsafe.org. And it's just talking about the needs around AI and the education, not just in the classroom, but also just overall in the education industry. And I like the way it kind of separates this out. And you notice, where it calls the skills and content, is really the smallest part. And that's what we're talking about today, the generative AI and how it faces students and teachers in the classroom, which is important. It needs to be addressed immediately. But I think it's important too that we realize, and Christian talked about a little bit, how it's now going to be embedded in so many of our applications across the board, and just that we need to have awareness and transparency into those things. And then finally, in the background, in our operational systems that many people won't even realize. They'll just maybe see improvement in performance. But these are kind of 3 levels that we are facing in education, and we'll need to come up with strategies for all of these. I was fortunate to attend a virtual conference this weekend called AI X Education. I was in a session with Chris Deedy out of Harvard, and he had some great analogies. And I'm just going to wrap up with this, that, he used a Star Trek analogy. He compared that AI does not have human judgment. It doesn't really even have judgment. And really, we should not be thinking of it as artificial human intelligence, but really thinking of it as an alien intelligence. And he said that, it's kind of humans have the experience and the judgment. We can look in a child's eye and we can read their eyes, and we can react to that emotionally, which is something AI will never be able to do. It can mimic, maybe come close or appear to have that skill, but it'll never really accomplish that. And so he said that, our challenge as educators is to look at in our new world that we need to be the Picards. We're the ones that add human judgments. And that's what we need to explain to our students, that they're the human and they're the ones that are going to use their experience and their emotions as far as judgment, but they can rely on AI as the data, the calculation piece to really augment our intelligence, but not substitute for it or the teacher in the classroom. So just some things to think about. I'm going to pass it on to our next speaker and talk a little more practical issues around AI.
Thank you, David. My name is Chris Hagel. I am the Executive Director of Digital Learning in the Peninsula School District in Gig Harbor, Washington, about an hour south of Seattle. And one of the things that we have been discussing here, specifically with our English teachers, when we saw in November when ChatGPT came out, we were like, oh my gosh, our English teachers are going to really, really struggle with this concept. And so we right away got in and start meeting with them in January of this year. And so we've had a cohort of teachers, secondary teachers have been meeting all year or last year. And one of the topics we started talking about in those conversations is what does plagiarism look like? What does cheating look like these days? And so it's kind of a really hard conversation. I think in our committee work that we've been doing with COSIN, we had this article that was shared earlier in the year, and I'll post the link in the chat just so you all have it, put together by a professor at a university, I think she's out of Canada, Dr. Sarah Elaine Eaton, and she talks about what is post-plagiarism and what does writing look like now in the age of artificial intelligence. And so, I really like this graphic a lot also. She said a few things that really resonated with me. Plagiarism, as it was historically defined, isn't a thing anymore. At least with AI and, the way it generates. And, kind of the other thing is the hybrid human AI writing has become normal. And that's kind of what I'm going to talk about a little bit more throughout my little section here. And how humans and AI are going to work together, and how AI is going to do some of the work, but you're still on the hook for what is generated. And so I really like this graphic. As I said, the blog post is linked there. I recently wrote a blog post for COSIN, and I will paste that link in. About how our district generated its kind of policy, I wouldn't say policy, philosophy and guidance document for this coming year for the district. And when I first released the first draft of this document to our teachers back in May, they said, well, did you write this or did ChatGPT? And that's a really hard thing to answer at the way that I put this together. Because, and I documented this a little bit in the blog post, and there's citations on our district website where you can see all of the work that I went through back and forth with ChatGPT. But I was the one that read the report from the U.S. Department of Ed. I was the one that read the report from COSIN. I was the one that read the blog posts from, college professors that were talking about this. And I took all the highlights of all of those articles, and then something's happening with the slides. Let's see if I can get them back to where we are. After those highlights, I put those into ChatGPT, had it generate a rough draft of what our philosophical belief statement might be. And then from there, I had ongoing conversations, saying, I don't like the metaphor you use. Let's talk about something different. And went back and forth quite a bit. And then, you take it out of there and I would put it back in Grammarly to fix up because it didn't generate the best written sentences. It didn't do some of that work. I then used ChatGPT to examine some of my own previous writing and then rewrite the work that it did based off of my writing styles. Brandon in the chat says he's had arguments with ChatGPT himself. I like that. But then I had to just rewrite it in my own writing style because, you know, a lot of the policies, especially in regards to technology in our district, are written by me. And so I want it to sound the same as what we're doing. You know, so I went back and forth. And so it was a conversation with ChatGPT. It was looking at things that I had already written, dumping it out to things like tools like Grammarly. I think I went back and forth between Grammarly and ChatGPT 2 or 3 times. And then at the very end, I realized, you know, boy, I missed an important part about AI detection tools. And my personal belief, and I think this is kind of becoming a popular belief, that they're not the greatest thing in the world. They're very unreliable, and we should really not be punishing students for if their work does or does not come up as AI because of the false positives that could be related to that. And so I just said to ChatGPT, I said, you know, here's a pretty solid draft of our document, but it's missing a paragraph around AI detection tools and how they're unreliable. Can you add a paragraph and then tell me where in our philosophical statement to put this? And so it did a wonderful job, generated the whole thing. And, you know, we now have after that, we took it to humans and they gave feedback and everything else, but we started with a really strong draft of something. But I wouldn't say that I wrote it, and I wouldn't say that ChatGPT wrote it, because there was a whole lot of work that happened behind the scenes that the AI wasn't doing itself. You know, I think in future years, we'll be able to just say, here are 3 or 4 reports, take the summaries out of them. And I probably could have, I didn't have access to Claude at the time. I might be able to use that Claude to do that now, or some of the other tools. But yeah, so it's a really hard conversation, and it really got our English teachers thinking about, you know, how are they going to have these conversations with kids? How are they going to teach this as a skill? Utilizing the conversation back and forth between these AI chat tools and themselves, and using them as a brainstorming partner, as a thought partner, as a assistant on the side to help them create what they want. And we were having a pretty big conversation with a instructional facilitator contractor that we brought in a couple of days ago with all of our administrators, you know, and she was talking about ways that administrators can use AI, but, you know, in the end, you're still owning the product. And so, you know, the last thing you want is to be having AI write evaluations, and then some teacher goes in and says, paste it into an AI detection tool and sees that you didn't write any of this. Do you really even care what I have to say? And so we were having a lot of those conversations about, you know, in the end, these are great tools to help you. They're great tools to generate content, but they're also your work. And so what do you want to be known for? What do you want? You know, you're putting your name on this as you own it. This is what you did. Make sure that what it's putting out is, you know, something you're proud of in the end. And so you can't just take it, you know, word for word in most cases. And so, yeah, that was kind of our journey on our, you know, district philosophies and belief statements. I think I'm just going to end with the next slide, which was one of the final quotes from that blog post from Dr. Eaton. You know, although humans can relinquish control, they do not relinquish responsibility for what's written. Humans can and must remain accountable for fact-checking, verification procedures, and truth-telling. So, you know, generative AI tools are amazing. They're doing so much to help us, but in the end, you have to own what gets written. And so, you know, that's what we're focusing on this year, is ways you can use it, but making sure that what you generate is still something that you're proud of. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our next presenter.
Well, hello, everyone. I am Dr. Stacy Hawthorne. I am the Chief Academic Officer for Learn 21. We are the Ohio COSIN, the Ohio SDPC, the Ohio ISTE affiliate, and our mission is to help schools refine their processes. And I'm gonna kind of pick up a little bit where Christian left off, where he said time and place to play, to give teachers a time and place to play, because that's how I learned to stop worrying and love AI tools, was a time and a place to play. So I didn't know Christian was gonna say that, but that's a perfect segue. I tell people all the time, this is just a funny little meme that I put in here. Unless you are Taylor Swift, you cannot break the internet. So just go ahead, hit the buttons, play with it, have some fun. Don't upload your personal information to, but other than that, play with it and have some fun. So that's why I wanted to start with that. I get the fun part of the presentation. And I'm just going to share a couple of things that were helpful to me. I did drop my email address in there. If you ever want to reach out about anything, happy to talk about AI or anything else, just love to connect. So there are 3 resources, and I'll put the links for each of these in the chat for you as well, that I use and I use regularly. The first one I've only been able to use for the last week because it is brand new. It just came out. It's a 5-part video series. They're about 10 to 12 minutes each, and it's practical AI for instructors and students, and it's from the Wharton School. And it is amazing. It's really well put together. It does such a good job of explaining things. And if you haven't seen it, it's a great way for to introduce your teachers at a training program or something along those lines to AI. I watched it on the treadmill, super fun. So yep, it is from Mullet. Yep. And the second one is the AI tool report. These are all free. This is a newsletter that I get. I get about 4 or 5 of them. AI tool report is one of my favorites. Sorry, these links are long. It's every single day. It's a free daily newsletter, and they give me 5 new apps that are doing things with AI. There's literally way more than 5 new ones every day, but they just give me 5 that they think are fun, and they give me 3 new prompts each day. So a prompt for Bing, a prompt for ChatGPT, and a prompt for Midjourney. And it's just a really good way for me to learn different ways to prompt and include things with when I'm asking AI for something. So I really like that. And then the last tool that I've got here for you is called AI Encyclopedia. And AI Encyclopedia purports to be the largest list of generative AI tools. So if you don't think 5 enough is a day, you can get 1,000 a day by going to AI Encyclopedia. So pick your poison. But I really think if you can think of something you want to do, need to do, there's an AI for it. That's just going to be the fact of life of where we're at today. So I always tell people, I've had people ask me before, like, how did you know how to do that? Or how did you know how to do that? And I always say, figure I'm not the smartest person in the world. And somebody wanted to do this before me. So if I just Google long enough, I'll find it. And so having that time to be able to play. So then I'm going to just real quick give you 6 fun apps. I am going to give you full disclosure. I have my CETL certification. I don't know that these 6 apps are good for use with students. So these are just fun things to play with if you want to experiment and have that fun that Christian was talking about with AI. I am in no way saying drop these into a classroom tomorrow. So please know that. Pete's going to talk about some more practical tools for AI, and his may be more suited for using with classroom. The first one, and I will drop all 3 of these links in there for you, is AudioCraft. It is from Meta, and it is a super slick text to audio generator. The best way to describe it is ChatGPT, but for music. So you can make soundtracks, you can make sounds, sound effects, you can make an entire musical score, whatever it is that you want, you can do that with AudioCraft. And there are 3 different apps within AudioCraft, and this link will take you to the main page. ChatGPT Me is just silly. If you want to turn your own face into your virtual assistant, that app will do it for you. And so you can load up your favorite large language model behind it, and then you can put it on your website and people can ask your face questions, and the large language model will come through you. So if that's what you've always wanted, what's better than a Bitmoji? Your own AI virtual assistant. So. And then another one, which is fun, but also a little bit practical, is Humata. And Humata works like ChatGPT, but its data source are your files. So if you want to ask it a question, instead of having it search the entire world history to answer your question for you, it will answer questions about specific files that you have. So it is a little bit more practical. I don't know about you, but I do occasionally make notes to myself and then don't remember where they are. So it's nice to be able to have a little better search engine for that kind of stuff. The last three that I'm going to share with you, and then I'll turn it back over to Pete to do something a little bit more serious with AI. But again, playing and having fun is a great way to get into things. Is Imagica. Imagica is, oh, I got too much on that link. Hold on just a second. Is an app to build, is AI to build an app in minutes with no code. So you want to build an app, you don't know how to code, Imagica can help you with that. I am doing a webinar in a couple months for ISTE on technology to actually support student well-being, because we hear so much about technology destroying student well-being. So we're trying to, help schools find that fine line of where there's some things. This is something that we're evaluating for that. It's Ogami, and I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right, so that's what I'm going to call it. But it's actually your own personal AI meditation coach. So if you want a free AI meditation coach, Ogami is another fun one for you. And then this one I really like because I'm huge into fonts. I want to know that my fonts are soothing, that they match, that they, don't just look good to me. Font Joy is free, and it will help you generate the perfect font pairing. So if you don't like what it generates for you, you can tell it why you don't like something, and it will regenerate a font pairing. So those are just non-threatening ways to play with AI. Although I don't know, I don't really want my face talking back to me. It's hard enough to look at yourself in a Zoom meeting, but if you want your face answering questions, play around with it, have some fun, build a little bit of self-confidence, and really enjoy what you're doing and take that passion back to your classroom. And I think that you will really be a lot happier for it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pete to talk about things that are a little bit more serious and practical in nature than having your own face talk back to you.
Thanks, Stacy. There are so many fun things that we can do with AI, I think, that it just continues to grow. And so I get the boring job of talking about productivity tools, but those are pretty fun too. We are interested in anything you might be using that we don't talk about, so please do add that to the chat. Obviously, we've been talking a lot about ChatGPT. I think we're realizing there's a continued increasingly greater limit to that product because of the training being kind of really up to 2022. So it's now 18 months old. So I think a lot of people have kind of already moved to other products. So when I'm thinking about productivity tools, I think of three different kinds: text to text, text to graphics, and then kind of administrative type tools. So Bing is now powered by GPT, and you can do some pretty amazing things with that. It actually does use current information, so it's trained on, I guess you could say, the internet. So it's really a great tool. Obviously, Google has been working on a lot of their AI products for many, many years, decades. Matter of fact, if you don't know, the T in GPT is Transformer, which was created by Google. So they've been out there for a long time with AI tools, but they just haven't put them out publicly. And so Bard is really a great tool if you haven't had a chance to use that yet. It's a little bit more, it does prompt you a little bit more on the types of things that you might want to ask it. But it's really a very nice alternative to ChatGPT or Bing or Bard. Bard is. And then Hugging Chat. Oh, by the way, I think it's kind of funny because it's always, just like Google up in the left-hand corner, it says, hey, this is still in beta, so Bard's an experiment. And this is just a good reminder, I think. All these things are experiments to a large degree right now. That's why they're free. They're very expensive. They're hoping to make a lot of money one day. But just like startups, that's not where they're at right now, other than venture cap money. So it's just a good reminder that these are all experiments. And therefore, some of the tools that you see you may want to be a little careful. So for example, I'll talk about one here in a minute, but Stacy talked about one. Hey, it can scan all of your files. Okay, that means you're uploading all of your files. You might want to be careful you don't have any IEPs or, you know, something sensitive in there. So just be aware of the fact that when you have something accessing your tool set, if you will, or your files, that is theirs. You have uploaded to them. So make sure to look and check out the PII stuff. The stuff I'm talking about also is really largely for us to kind of learn a little bit more about. If you haven't seen Hugging Face or Hugging Chat, it's a really great tool, very different and much more geeky, I'd say, but it also gives you different kinds of answers. So, you know, what we're trying to do is we're trying to learn a little bit more about these different types of tools. And so these are 3 text tools that I've used quite a bit. When we talk to text to graphics, again, you're just typing in the text and here comes a visual representation. Bing is a great product as well. So for example, if I say, hey, I want to look at, show me AI productivity tools for the educational leadership, here's what I got. Then if you want to get more specific, the great thing about AI tools is you can say, oh, well, I want it to be more elementary principles, not this kind of bizarre stuff. So it gives you something else, which this is what it thinks when it says elementary principles. So it's a great tool to kind of create these images, and then you pick one that you like, and then you can utilize that for whatever it is that you're doing. Another thing that Stacy mentioned is Midjourney. The way that works, though, is kind of a little bit differently, and it's a little bit more complicated. You have to have a Discord account to make it work, and so on and so forth. But you just put in some things in quotations like here, and then you get a really cool, you know, graphic generated from that. And if you haven't seen Dream Studio, that is what is a new version of Stability AI. Their product is become very advanced and has some really cool things that it could do. These were all generated from Stability AI, or what is now called Dream Studio. And then when it gets to administrative tools, there's a number of things that are pretty cool that that you can use. Record once, and some of these things you have to pay for after kind of a little window of testing. But record once, if you haven't heard of that, it's a really cool tool if part of your job is to create little video, you know, explanations. I used to do a lot of that, and if you've done a lot of that, you know that to do a 2-minute one is going to take you more than 2 minutes. Why? Well, because you say something wrong, you click on the wrong thing, and then you got to go back and start all over again. Unless you have record once, that product will let you just do it. You make the mistakes, it automatically will edit those out for you. So really, really cool way to kind of expedite your process for creating little video snippets of information for your staff or professional development, whatever it might be. Really cool. What about PDFs? I sometimes would read these enormous PDF files looking for answers to things I was trying to understand about a contract, terms and conditions, something like that. Here's one I took. I kind of blanked out the name of the company, but you know, you can ask it questions. What does it say about asbestos removal? What does it say about you know, this, that, or the other thing? And it will answer your questions. I'd say it's at least 90% on the mark, but that's Chat PDF. If you haven't seen Fireflies yet, you probably have been on a conference call where it has sat in for someone or was taking notes for someone. Very popular, I'd say, AI tool, somewhat annoying for some people. So I think it's good protocol for you to say, hey, I am going to run Fireflies, because I don't know about you, but most of the calls that I've been on were not being recorded or transcribed. And so what people will say when there's a bot listening and transcribing every word, or if it's recorded, might be different than what they say without that. So just be aware. But if it's something that you really need help with in terms of the taking of the notes, or it's a very formal meeting, it's a really, really cool tool. And then another one that I have been using lately is something called Gamma, and it's a presentation creator. A lot of these AI tools, productivity tools, you'll notice just like the graphic tools, there's always something a little bit like not right about it. Like I did one with a bunch of superintendents on Stability AI, and it said, draw me a unicorn romping through a field. And all the unicorns had 2 or 3 horns. So they weren't unicorns. So like weird things, that pop up. And I saw this with Gamma too. But it will create for you your presentation in very short order. And so it's been really a fun thing to play with. And it gave me, especially when you're talking about general topics, it does a really good job of drawing those out and giving you a lot of unique visuals and things like that. And then you can export it to a PowerPoint file and then add on to it if you'd like. So these are some great tools that I'd encourage you to try. I'll drop in links to all of these here shortly. But then now it's time to move on to something else. Lindy?
All right, thank you, Pete. I don't know, I get to do the tail end here, the roundup at the end, and kind of end off this webinar in the next few minutes. I got a little entranced there with learning all this great information. I was tweeting and I was adding stuff, all your great tools in my Wakelet collection. I was more excited for this webinar to learn from all of my colleagues than share anything. My name is Lindy. I live in Bozeman, Montana. I am the founder and instructional technologist at Integrated PD. So I taught as a middle school, high school teacher, and have throughout the years become the instructional technology person. So I work with a lot of schools all across the world, and I work with a lot of tech and ed tech companies on their products. So I'm going to talk to you today about assessing in the age of generative AI. When ChatGPT was released to the public in November of 2022, all of a sudden, generative AI was available to every person in the world, and it really changed the game. And so I was hearing this question, and I still am. I just did a webinar yesterday. I did another webinar this morning. And in both of those, I got this question from teachers. How do I assess learning when these generative AI tools like ChatGPT and Bard and Claude can complete traditional assessments with a high level of accuracy? And we saw the statistics of them completing standardized assessments with an 80% percentile, I think is what we said earlier in the webinar. So my answer is that we need to create assessments that are copy and paste proof, AI copy and paste proof, obviously, but that's not what we want to do as educators, is make assessments that students can just copy and paste. And most of our assessments, multiple choice, short answer, having students write an essay, are copy and pasteable from a generative AI chatbot. So we got to kind of change what we're doing. And my suggestion is to amplify the human advantage. And I put this in the chat earlier when someone was talking about, basically like AI is never going to be better than us. I think it was David who said that, right? Like the definition of AI is to mimic human intelligence. Humans are always going to be more intelligent, especially in certain ways, than AI. Of course, in my opinion, we don't know. We'll see what the technology is, but that's my opinion. So one specific way that we can amplify the human advantage is to think about the 4 C's of 21st century learning. These are really essential human skills, right? We collaborate, we think critically, we're creative, we communicate well. Now, AI at first was not very good at any of these, as you've seen in all these tools that Stacy and Pete shared. Like, it's getting better, it's getting more creative, it's getting more collaborative, but it's still not even close to humans' ability, right, to be creative and think critically. So my proposal is to further emphasize and expand the 4 C's when we're thinking about all learning tasks, but especially assessments. And I just wanted to sink in for a second that with the advent of generative AI, we have this really incredible opportunity as humans, as educators, to spend more time and energy cultivating these skills like critical thinking and creativity. And so if you're like scratching your head, what does she mean by that? Let me give you some specific examples. So this is an example of an assessment for most likely like an art class. I actually did a webinar this morning. I had an art teacher in here and I gave this example, and she was so pumped at this example of a way that she can bridge art and AI together. So their students are learning about the Impressionist movement. The assignment is explain in a series of snaps or a Snapchat video what characteristics identify art from the Impressionist movement. They have to have at least 3 examples of Impressionist art, and they have to identify the characteristics described. Okay, so let's look at an example here. So if you're not familiar with Snapchat, it's in the shape of a phone, so you kind of have that long portrait view. This would be like 3 snaps that would be a series. I just kind of put them here for sake of you looking at them. But as you can see, I've got my 3 characteristics. So the painting style, you have those very visible brushstrokes like in Starry Night, frequently painting outdoor scenes, and then capturing specific moments in time. Those are my 3 characteristics of the Impressionist movement. But then I had to find examples, and I was able to annotate over the top of them, etc. So the elephant in the room is like, yes, I could go ask a chatbot, what are the key characteristics of the Impressionist movement? Of course, that's actually what I did to make this example, to be quite honest. But no AI can then currently take that information and synthesize it, right? And apply it here. That's the human advantage. And that's the true essence of this assessment, right? So kind of bringing that around, while it's possible for students to see content answers from the AI chatbot, the true essence is that ability to comprehend. I had to comprehend that information. I had to synthesize it into that authentic creation. But here's the really cool part, kind of getting back to the 4 C's, is that from a collaboration standpoint, I think it was Chris, who shared the 6 tenets of post-plagiarism writing in the age of AI. And I pulled it up here and was reading it while he was talking. And literally the second paragraph says, hybrid human AI writing will become normal. Okay, so that's what I'm proposing here. This new idea that we have to expand the horizon of collaboration to include collaborating with AI. Now, this assignment, I collaborated with AI, but it couldn't be completed fully by AI. And then here's where it gets really cool. By collaborating with AI, I was able to reduce my cognitive load, because instead of having to take and do a Google search and find all these different sources and pull all that information together to learn about the characteristics of the Impressionist movement, ChatGPT did it for me, right? So I'm reducing cognitive load. I'm freeing my mind in order to then think critically by reducing cognitive load. And then where it gets extra cool is that I save time, because I didn't have to take and pull all this different research, right? And pull it all together. It was super quick. So I was able to spend more time being creative. I was able to spend more time by streamlining that part of it. I could nurture my creative abilities more. So that's what I mean by expanding the 4 C's and really emphasizing the 4 C's when we're thinking about all learning tasks, but especially assessments in the age of generative AI. So how do you do this? The example I gave you used Canva. Canva for Education is free to schools. You can use lots of different tools. I have some Google Slide templates I'll share with you, as well as some Canva templates, just to give 2 specific tools. But basically, it's just an idea of getting your teachers to think about creating assessment that focus on synthesizing information into a creation, making visuals, adding multimedia, audio, video, images, text, annotations, right? Like there's no AI out there right now that can do all of that together. Adding student voice. I'm a huge fan of screencast videos. So no matter what you're doing for an assessment, have your students put it into Flip, or Canva even has a screen recorder video, and have them explain it, right? And in order to understand something or I should say, in order to explain something, you have to understand it, right? And that's a really great way to make sure that your AI copy and pasting, proofing your assessments. Make sure that your assessments require evaluating, synthesizing, analyzing information. I gave the idea of Snapchats, but you can also do short form videos. These are awesome. So like TikTok style videos. Yelp reviews are super great. I have a Canva template for it. Making Pinterest boards. I have a Google Slide template for that. Memes, social media campaigns. I talked about screencast videos. And the bonus of all of these ideas is that they appeal to students' worlds, right? They live for instant answers, sharing to authentic audiences, evolving technology. So you're potentially increasing student engagement at the same time as copy and paste proofing your assessments. All right, so finally, to wrap up here, I just wanted to end on a real positive note. And I said this in my webinar this morning, and I just feel like it's super important that AI has presented this really pivotal, unprecedented opportunity, and I should say generative AI specifically, to revolutionize the way that we assess learning in traditional education environments. And I really hope that education takes advantage of this. And I think it was Christian that mentioned earlier, like, you're not going to be able to block. You already can't really, it's ubiquitous. AI is ubiquitous, and it's going to be even more ubiquitous in every tool that we use. So instead of thinking about blocking, banning, plagiarism detectors, I think this is the route that we need to take in this real pivotal moment. So I will put a link in the chat to a blog post that I have that kind of summarizes everything that I just talked about, plus adds more. It has links to templates, ideas, examples, really great resource to share with your teachers as they're thinking about potentially revamping their assessments. All right, I'll hand it back over to Doug for Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Lindy. Great job. We have some time for Q&A. Actually, Laura, can you speak so your thing comes up on the screen, your graphic facilitation screen, just to show everyone what it looks like?
Hello, everyone. It is really, really wonderful to be here and hear all of these insights and the rich questions that you're thinking about with AI. And more importantly, how each of these different perspectives from each of the experts and active learners in this space are coming together. You know, professional development weaves into this idea of play and productivity tools. We've got this whole question of how do we interact with students in this generative AI influenced space? How do we make it be a three-way conversation or more between educators, the technology, and the students? How do we amplify student voice? Thank you for the opportunity to listen and learn from you all today. And I'm excited to hear what questions you have as we move into the Q&A portion.
So does anybody have any questions of each other while we do this? I know I have a couple of questions. Not seeing any. If anybody wants to share their questions in the chat as well, I'll just read them out and ask I'll ask the people who spoke today. A lot of thank yous. I do have a question. I know, Chris, you mentioned in the chat, and I think Stacy, you mentioned, was it the Humata app? That the possibilities of that is just kind of amazing, right? You just upload your own world up there, and that's the basis of what you get back. So think about teachers, or Chris is thinking about superintendent, something answering questions from people in the community.
Yeah, and really good point from Pete right after me too. Like, don't upload an IP in there. So.
We have one question. It says, could the presenters address AI in regards to equity?
I'll talk to it real quick. I think it is very much a matter of access. And so when we talk about banning, that creates a much more inequitable situation. Obviously, we might need to shut something down because we're concerned with PII, but we have to realize that when we do that, we are impacting students who don't have access through a data plan or don't have access at home. So I do think that that's kind of it can create a greater divide than we've had before, an opportunity divide. And obviously that's something that we as leaders need to really understand.
Pete, I want to add to that too. You 100% agree with everything you said there. And we did have some presenters mention that there is some bias and hallucinations and things like that in AI, but using those as learning opportunities for students to see that as bias, to point that out to them. You know, I think about that example, and if you haven't seen it, I can find it, of the student from MIT that asked one of the AIs to create a more professional headshot for her, and all it did was lighten her complexion. and I thought the most unprofessional thing about her original picture was the fact that she was wearing a t-shirt that said MIT on it, and it made the t-shirt bigger so that you could see the MIT logo. So it thought, okay, if I make her whiter and I make MIT show out, that'll be more professional. So, but using what you see, using that bias that you see to actually help show, teach equity and to teach inclusion, and using these as real authentic learning opportunities is important too.
I'll just add real quick, as the co-chair of the committee, we will be looking at applications, but we will also be in future blog posts and possible webinars looking at what are great resources for not just teachers, but to students, because we didn't really talk a lot about in this webinar how important it is to teach students about AI, how it works, and all these factors and cautions that we need to inform them, probably even before we try to teach them how to use it. We need to educate them about how AI works. So that'll be coming up. Little plug. Hope you stay with us.
Anybody else have any closing thoughts? All right, and with that, we're about 2 minutes after the hour. I think we took an hour of your time today. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you to all the presenters, and thank you to Cozen for hosting us as well. Thank you.